picture, curtain lights. This is it. We'll hit the heights. And oh, what heights we'll hit. On with the show. This is it.
Hello, and welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale, the Real Seeker. And today's going to be a grand finale show. Now, it's a little bit clickbait, but not entirely. So, as my audience will know, I have worked since my conversion on my podcast and doing evangelism, sharing apologetics, evidences, and knowledge for 6 years, pretty much straight, since my conversion in May of 2018, all the way up till now, with basically only 2 1-month vacations. Every weekend, sometimes up to 5 or 6 episodes a week, giving you guys episodes and podcasts with some of the top scholars in the world. Also, laymen doing debates, doing lectures, doing solo shows, and that sort of thing. Now, unfortunately, for personal reasons, I can't maintain this any longer, at least on a weekly level. So I was hoping I did have scheduled until the end of the year, the calendar year, at which point I was going to make this announcement in January. But wouldn't you know it, once again, things went wrong with guests and cancellations happen and postponements happen and stuff like that. So I'm not going to be able to do that. So I figured, okay, I'm going to make this announcement here. Now, why is it clickbait? So is Real Seekers really ending? Absolutely not, and never. I promise you guys I'm here for my audience, for Real Seekers, and I will always be. This is the most important thing that I do in my life. So Real Seekers will always be on as long as I have an internet connection and that sort of thing. But I don't think I'm going to be able to maintain doing it on a weekly basis where I'm trying to find guests each week, especially as of late. There's been a whole bunch of guest cancellations or postponements. They're complicating things, especially if I'm juggling like 5 or 6 people a week and that sort of thing. So for a while, I've wanted to kind of slow things down and do my podcast more on my terms, on an ad hoc basis, when I have a show or I've done something that's important, or if a guest asks to come on or something like that, or I'm asked to go on another podcast. So yeah, Real Seekers is not ending. That's kind of clickbaity. But I'm not going to be doing it on a weekly basis from now on. I'm just going to be doing it, hey, when I've got a show. So, for example, I've got several guest shows left over. For example, I'm having a grand show in January with Dr. Gary Habermas. It's a celebration show of the 14 years for his 4-volume that he spent researching his 4-volume book on the resurrection. And also, it's been 14 years since I met him, and he started helping me. So when he started helping me with my religious research, was when he just started his massive 4-volume scholarly work on the resurrection. So I want to do a special celebration show, and that will be a not to miss episode. That'll be in January. I'm going to be doing a debate with Dr. Shabir Ali in January. I've got other guests. I've got Tyler Vela coming on my show in November to talk about the problem of evil with David Russell and perhaps Travis Lee. And I've got others scheduled to come on. David Falk will be coming on in December to speak about the Exodus. David Campbell Cook, obviously Massimo might be coming back to speak on the Marian apparitions and stuff like that. Plus, I have my Shroud Wars series to continue. There are various panel shows. So don't worry, none of that's going away. That'll all still be in place. It's just I'm not going to be under pressure to, oh, shoot, if a guest cancels, now I've got to find a replacement or do a replacement show each and every single week. And again, besides the scheduling issues, there are personal reasons why I need to slow down and take a break for a little bit. One of which you guys will be excited is my Shroud book. Look, it's just been hard making substantial progress for my Shroud book that I want you guys to have access to. So I really want to dedicate a few months to like really getting that finished and writing that up and doing the research and actually making some good progress on that. And that's hard to do when I'm doing not only a guest, one guest every single week, but like sometimes multiple guests every single week. So that's one of the personal reasons why I'm taking this break. But again, if you're, Jack Markworth's still going to be coming back to do his series on the Shroud. I'm going to be having Hugh Ferry on and Mark Guskin perhaps to speak about image formation. So all of the shows with guests that I had lined up are still going to happen. It's just you're not guaranteed one every week. But yeah, that's the grand finale announcement. This is kind of my last show where every single week I would guarantee I'm going to have something up, at least for the foreseeable future when I'm working on my Shroud book and other sort of things. Maybe in time I'll come back and we'll come back and doing the weekly basis type deal. So yeah, that's the first announcement in terms of Real Seekers, and I think it'll give you guys much more quality level episodes when I have the time to devote to doing the research and then presenting my best case, like I did with the cosmological argument or the hiddenness of God or the Shroud and that sort of thing. Getting back to my solo series and my book and that sort of thing. And I'll still be a guest. I'm still open if somebody wants to invite me on their podcast. I'll be going on S.J. Thomason's show, continuing on that series. Great Light Studios with Jordan Hatfield. I remember him. I've got plans to do a series on his show, and wherever I'm invited, if I'm invited on a podcast, I'm still open to doing that, and we'll be doing those. So, yeah, I hope that's making sense to everyone. So now some even greater news in terms of the Shroud of Turin. So as you guys know, I've been trying to see if it was possible to make money through the podcast and that sort of thing. And that just, for whatever reason, doesn't look like that will be happening anytime soon, which is totally fine. I am grateful for Annette Cloutier and Brian B., who's a non-Christian, who are, helping me out on a regular basis with, some contributions. There's a third person as well who wishes to be anonymous. And I continue to thank them for their great help and that sort of thing. I'm going to continue posting up shows once a week on Patreon for those people based on old shows that are already up on Real Seekers, but going back over those old shows, starting with my Skeptics and Seekers. So all that will continue. But I had to come up with another way to try and make money. And I think that sharing my knowledge and teaching and in churches is a great way to do that. So I taught a Bible study on the Shroud of Turin at Oakwood Wesleyan Church there. And I posted that up on YouTube and it went great. I was able to convince skeptics, including a skeptical pastor, that the Shroud of Turin is definitely great evidence for Jesus' resurrection. And because of that, I'm trying to reach out to see if it's possible to teach at other churches about the Shroud or other topics. I'm also going back to return to Oakwood to teach the historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection in a 4-week Bible study in January. So I'm open to other topics, but I want to promote the Shroud of Turin. So in the first place, let me just I wanted to open it up to you guys as fans. Maybe this is a good way you guys can help me out. Maybe why don't you guys, if you're willing, ask your own churches if they're interested in having me teach an online or in-person Bible study course. Again, in-person would obviously have to be if it's in Toronto or someplace close by. But otherwise, most churches, I think, prefer doing it on Zoom, a virtual study. That's how I taught at Oakwood on the Shroud of Turin. And to that front, let me just show you some of the new stuff that I've got going on for this Bible study that I'm trying to. I think this is a good way to bring the Shroud as new knowledge to people in the churches where it's desperately needed. So you can see on my Real Seekers blog site, I've got this new tab called Real Seekers Bible Studies, where I have sort of a description of what I'm doing and that sort of thing. They can contact me at realseekerministry@gmail.com if they're interested. I've got a brochure and flyers, which I'll be showing. Let me just show it now. So here's the brochure. This is the printable version for you guys. So if your church is interested or your pastor is interested, and having me teach at your church, and on the Shroud of Turin in particular. Here's this should say Shroud Explorations. Okay, so I'm gonna have to update that one. But yeah, otherwise, I have a flyer. If you're at a seminary school or something like that, and you just want to have me teach, here's Shroud Explorations with Dale Glover. And I've got a new website, shroudexplorations.wordpress.com. I'll just show that. Here's some information, general information about me, the Shroud, some of the scholars I've worked with, how to contact me, and stuff like that. Obviously, it's through my Real Seeker Ministries website or on my email, which is realseekerministry@gmail.com. And I think that would be great to be able to go to a seminary, school, or a church, either in person or more preferably, because you guys are all over in the US and the UK and stuff, doing a Zoom course teaching about the Shroud of Turin, because that's not well known in the churches. And like I said, if the Shroud isn't your church's cup of tea, I'm willing to teach other topics, messianic prophecies, the existence of God, historical evidence for the resurrection, a whole bunch of topics in the philosophy of religion and Christian apologetics that I'd be willing to teach your church for, and that sort of thing. So, shroudexplorations.wordpress.com for this new website. And I want to thank Jamie Castro. He's the one who really did a lot of the hard work in terms of building this new website, making the flyer and the brochure. All right, so here's the non-printable version of the brochure, Shroud Explorations with Dale Glover, and has my contact information. This is again based on the Shroud of Turin, and it's based on a 4-week lecture plan. I'm totally flexible. Again, if you want more or less weeks than that, I can accommodate and change up the series to fit that. And again, I'm not just about the Shroud, although I'm pushing the Shroud primarily because I think that's a topic that'll be new and perhaps interesting to a lot of churches. But like I said, I'm open to other topics. I have a master's in philosophy. I specialize in the philosophy of religion, and I'm interested in Christian apologetics, a whole wide range of theological and philosophical topics that I'm happy to share my knowledge in if I have it. All right, so that's it for the Shroud Explorations Bible study and or my Real Seekers Bible study announcement. And here's a 4-minute promo video for my new Shroud Explorations Bible study session.
Join Christian apologist, Bible teacher, and expert on the Shroud of Turin, Dale Glover, in his new and exciting 4-part series which include Lecture 1, Intro to the Shroud of Turin and its Images. Lecture 2, How were the Shroud images formed? Lecture 3, The Shroud's Historical Authenticity. And Lecture 4, Refuting Shroud Skeptics, Answering Objections. You can now book Dale to speak or teach in person or virtually at your church, school, or organization. Dale was recently booked to virtually teach on the Shroud of Turin at the Oakwood Wesleyan Church in Toronto by Pastor Dr. Sewell Prince.
Basically, this is a long linen cloth. It's about 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide. And it has both the front image and the back image. The back image is kind of blocked by this panel here, but the front and back images of a man who appears to have been crucified. He has the nail wounds in the wrist and on the feet. As well, there are many bloodstains consistent with scourge wounds that seem to look like a Roman scourge weapon. There's also wounds on the forehead, on the head that represent the crown of thorns. And finally, there's a major wound right in the chest that looks like it's the result of a spear going through and piercing the heart. And interestingly, on the shroud, it's been studied, there is actually two separate fluids. There's blood and water, just like we learn in the Gospel of John. So on this basis, many scientists and experts have concluded that the images on the shroud represent Jesus Christ, and that the cloth itself is the actual burial cloth mentioned in the Gospel.
Shroud Explorations is sponsored by Real Seeker Ministries and Podcast, which has featured host Dale Glover interviewing some of the world's top Christian apologists, which would include Dr. William Lane Craig, Sean McDowell, Mike Licona, Craig Keener, Dr. Michael Brown, and Dr. Gary Habermas, to mention a few. Discover the world's greatest unsolved mystery in the Shroud of Turin with Dale Glover. Through Dale's in-depth teaching series, you will discover several important things about the Shroud of Turin. First, you will discover how it is the most famous and studied artifact in Christian history. Secondly, you will discover that modern forensic science has proved that it is not a forgery but the actual burial cloth of a crucified man. And thirdly, you will discover how many shroud skeptics have been converted to Christ as a result of the overwhelming new evidence for the shroud being the actual burial cloth of Christ. Even renowned Christian historians like Dr. Gary Habermas from Liberty University puts the authenticity of the shroud as high as 85%. The growing evidence for the Shroud of Turin in recent years has brought the awareness and interest in the shroud into the forefront of the mainstream media. Many mainstream documentaries and stories have been featured on the Shroud of Turin, which have included coverage from National Geographic, the History Channel, CNN, Fox News, BBC, NBC News, CBC News, USA Today, Daily Mail, and the Washington Post, to mention a few. Luke 24 verse 12 documents that Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths by themselves, and went home marveling at what happened. Could the Shroud of Turin be the actual burial cloth of Jesus? To find out the answer to this important question and many more, please connect with Dale Glover today, to book him to speak or teach at your church, school, or organization on the Shroud of Turin or on other related topics which he has specialized in, such as the historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection, the Messianic prophecies, a new argument from unique circumstances, or the existence and attributes of God versus atheism.
All right, so that's the video. That's through my email, Real Seeker Ministries, ministry, singular, @gmail.com. And I'll be able to reach out and work something out with your church. All right, so that's it for that. Now I want to move on to the next part of this video. And we have not just one, but two videos from that famous Christian scientist, Harry Stark. So what's the first one on? It's on superheroes, particular the X-Men cartoon from the 1990s. Is there allegories to Christ and Christianity in these superhero cartoons? Well, Harry Stark says, yep, you betcha. So let's take a look at what he has to say.
The animated TV series X-Men was released in 1992 and is about the adventures of a superhero group from the Marvel comic book series. Episode 53 is titled Nightcrawler and is about a superhero called Nightcrawler. The superhero Nightcrawler is also known as Kurt Wagner. He lived in a Catholic Christian monastery in Germany. Nightcrawler was abandoned by his mother as a child. Upon meeting his mother, who abandoned him, Nightcrawler said, quote,
I will beg God to bestow his grace on me, so that I may learn to forgive you. Then I will ask him to bestow his grace on you, so that you might forgive yourself.
End of quote. Upon seeing suffering and evil in the world, Nightcrawler said, quote,
though all people are flawed and all struggle with the capacity for sin, none likes to be reminded of our shared human weakness. But then I found peace by devoting my life to God. He directed me to this place where they value the character of my heart, not my appearance.
End of quote. Nightcrawler continued, quote,
God does not give up on his children. He is there for us in our times of joy and to help us when we are in pain, if we let him.
End of quote. In response to a suffering and tragedy, Nightcrawler said,
our ability to understand God's purpose is limited, but we take comfort in the fact that his love is limitless.
In this sentence, Nightcrawler has introduced the solution to the deductive problem of evil. The philosopher Alvin Plantinga in Analytic Philosophy has mentioned the solution. The solution is that God may have a morally sufficient reason to allow for suffering in principle. Additionally, suffering exists since human beings have free will. As long as human beings have free will, human beings will always be capable of evil actions. Furthermore, the existence of evil provides evidence for the existence of God. The problem of evil has a prerequisite. The prerequisite for the problem of evil is that there is an external morality. An external morality is a term that is used to denote that moral judgments that can be applied to other human beings. A few examples of such moral judgments include genocide, murder, and rape. The existence of evil must be part of the external world, and some things must be actually wicked in themselves in order for the problem of evil to emerge in the first place. Hence, the problem of evil gives evidence for moral realism and moral laws. And a moral law implies a moral lawgiver, namely God. This is known as the moral argument for God in analytic philosophy. Nightcrawler continued, quote,
Open your heart, Herr Logan. Would it hurt so much to see the world through different eyes?
End of quote. Nightcrawler continued, quote,
The foundation God has built in our hearts can never be destroyed.
End of quote. Nightcrawler gave the character Wolverine a Bible to read on his way home. In Paris, Wolverine went into a Catholic church and decided to place his faith in Jesus. In the Catholic Church, Wolverine said, quote,
I will give thanks to you, Lord, for though you were angry with me, and your anger turned away, and comforted me. I will trust and will not be afraid.
End of quote. Wolverine then bowed his head before the crucifix in the church. The character Rogue was very moved by Nightcrawler and Wolverine.
Most scholars accept the following historical facts about Jesus. 1. Jesus was crucified by Pontius Pilate and placed in a tomb. 2. The next day, the tomb was empty. 3. The apostles had experiences with the risen Jesus, which even convinced the enemy James. 4. The apostles were persecuted for their experiences with the risen Jesus. 5. The apostles were martyred for their experiences with the risen Jesus. Was the resurrection of Jesus a later construction? The answer is no. Since the Corinthian Creed is dated to the same year as the events transpired, and the New Testament was written the same century as the events transpired. Did the apostles make up the resurrection? The answer is no. The apostles were persecuted, tortured, and finally martyred for their experiences of the risen Jesus. For example, the apostle Paul had power when he was a religious Jew, and lost power when he became a Christian. Therefore, the apostle Paul was sincere. Was the resurrection of Jesus a hallucination? The answer is no. If it was hallucination, then the body should have been in the tomb. Since the tomb was empty, it is impossible for the resurrection to have been a hallucination. The only explanation that can account for all 5 of the facts is that the apostles were sincere about their experiences and that Jesus really was resurrected from the dead. By accepting Jesus Christ as Lord and what Jesus did on the cross for you, you will have eternal life. The Jewish scholar Pinchas Lapid said the following, quote, I accept the resurrection of Easter Sunday as a historical event, end quote. His final position was that people need Jesus to enter heaven. The historian Mike Licona said the following, quote, I assessed it as very probable that Jesus rose from the dead, based on the fact that the resurrection hypothesis explains the knowable data in a manner that is so superior to competing hypotheses, end quote. The Jewish scholar Rochmiel Friedland said the following, quote, I prayed and asked the Messiah Jesus to become my atonement and Savior, end quote. He accepted Jesus as Messiah and Savior. Christianity is true. For more information, go to the website coldcasechristianity.com and the website crossexamined.org.
I find it fascinating. So I grew up in the 90s, and I never watched the X-Men. I was more a fan of the Spider-Man, the animated series cartoon there. But I remember seeing cartoon commercials for X-Men, and it was very popular at the time and stuff like that. But it's very interesting. I had no idea that in a cartoon in the 1990s there was talk of Christianity specifically. I know in the 90s there was a lot of talk about God and vague allusions to the Christian God and stuff like that in pop culture. But to be so explicit, that's rather remarkable. I wish it was Protestantism, not Catholicism, but still, it's the fact that a character gives the Bible and that presents the gospel message, and then Wolverine, of all people, repents and places his faith or trust in the Christian God, and that's in a cartoon. Wow. Okay. I did not know that. I had no idea. I have a newfound respect for the X-Men cartoon and the creators of that show. Um, Amazing. All right, cool. Well, with that said, let's move on to Harry Stark's next and final video. This one's returning to his series, Trying to Witness to the Jews. And man, a lot of Jews of the rabbinic sort have taken various issue, and they've persecuted, dare I say, Harry Stark a little bit. They've been kicking him out of groups. He's shared this video with them on Facebook groups, and I've seen some of the comments. It's disgusting, and I'm beyond that. I'm just shocked at how hateful these people are to to a Christian, and respond even hearing anything about Jesus and stuff like that. Obviously, he's been making a lot of videos about messianic prophecies and Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, and how they've died for their faith as martyrs over the years. And now he's going into this video specifically of Jewish persecution of Christians and that sort of thing. And I just want to say, if you're Jewish and religiously Jewish, history is history. Grow up and get over it. Facts don't care about your feelings. We have to be honest about the evil deeds that Jewish people have done throughout the centuries against Christians. But guess what? Nobody's saying you're unique. This isn't anti-Semitism. I don't. Again, I'm not going to speak for Harry, but I can tell through his actions. And for me, I'm philo Jewish. I love Jewish people. They're the people. Jesus was Jewish. All of the first Christians were Jewish, and that sort of thing. So I love the Jewish people just as I love all Gentiles. There's neither male nor female, Jew nor Gentile, slave nor master. And we're all one in Christ, and I literally believe that. Again, I grew up in the 90s when before race baiting and all this SJW identity politics nonsense that you get from the communist Kamala Harris. No, I grew up when racism was virtually dead, by and large, and was certainly dead on a systematic level. And people they didn't see race. They saw people as people. And that's what I believe the Christian worldview is supposed to be. And we just have to be honest. Yeah, Jewish people have done some sinful things. They're sinners, as even the Old Testament tells us. But so is everybody. Look, as no one will be afraid to mention, there are plenty of cases of Christians persecuting innocent Jews too, or Muslims persecuting innocent Jews, or godless atheists persecuting Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we live in a fallen world, and because of sin, people will persecute other people that are different from them, have a different religion or a different ethnicity or a different gender or whatever. That just happens throughout human history because of sin, and it's wrong, and we shouldn't do that. But it's equally wrong to be like, oh, you're saying something, you're talking about historical facts and just be, oh, it's negative about Jewish people, therefore you're an anti-Semite. No, shut up. That's not anti-Semitic. How dare you, you race baiter? We're dealing with historical facts, and we're just presenting that. And nowhere in this video is Harry Stark's motivation, nor my motivation in posting this, meant to cause hate or incite violence against a group of people. It's not anti-Semitic. As I said, I actually have a special fondness for the Jewish people because of their close association. If it weren't for the Jewish people, I would not be saved today. Gentiles would not be saved. You guys, the nation of Israel, were the light through which crystallized in the Jewish Messiah, Jesus Christ, and the Son of God, becoming incarnate and dying on the cross, not just for my sins, but for the Jewish sins as well, the sins of the whole world. So this is the most loving message that's possible, and that's Harry Stark's intent, is to preach to Jews. In this series, he's targeted the Jewish people, and he's trying to say, like, look, you guys aren't perfect. Look, you've sinned, but guess what? There's forgiveness for all people's sins if you will place your faith and recognize the truth that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. That's all that's being said here.
Rabbinic Jews have violently persecuted followers of Jesus throughout history. Rabbinic Jews refer to Jews who reject Jesus based on the Pharisaic rabbis. The earliest documented case of anti-Semitism in the Common Era is by Rabbinic Jews during the 1st century. During the 1st century, the Jewish follower of Jesus called Saint Stephen was murdered by Rabbinic Jews. Stephen was stoned to death. The Rabbinic rabbis supported the murder. The only reason Stephen was murdered was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 1st century, the Jewish apostle Paul began his life as a Pharisee and Rabbinic Jew. He persecuted followers of Jesus. He was involved in the murder of Saint Stephen. Paul later repented from his sins and accepted Jesus as Messiah. Jesus forgave him. After Paul accepted Jesus as Messiah, he was severely tortured by Rabbinic Jews and left to die. The only reason Paul was tortured was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 1st century, the Jewish apostle James the Just was murdered by Rabbinic Jews. James was stoned to death. The only reason James was murdered was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 2nd century, the Rabbinic Jewish leader Bar Kokhba massacred Jewish followers of Jesus. The Rabbinic rabbis supported the massacre. The only reason they were massacred was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 2nd century, the Rabbinic Jews were involved in the murder of the Bishop Polycarp. Polycarp was burned at the stake, and the Rabbinic Jews prepared the fire. The only reason Polycarp was murdered was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 2nd century, the Rabbinic Jews were involved in the murder of the Jewish Bishop Simon of Jerusalem. The only reason Simon was murdered was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 2nd century, Rabbinic Jews filed in false complaints against the innocent follower of Jesus called Paraskevi, with the intention to hurt Paraskevi. This caused Paraskevi to be summoned to the Roman emperor, who severely tortured her. The only reason she was tortured was because she accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 3rd century, Matrona of Thessalonica was a follower of Jesus and was the servant of a Rabbinic Jewish woman. The Rabbinic Jewish woman mocked Jesus in front of Matrona and tried to make Matrona deny Jesus by force. When Matrona refused to attend the Rabbinic Jewish synagogue with her, the Rabbinic Jewish woman tortured Matrona to death. The only reason Matrona was murdered was because she accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 3rd century, the Rabbinic Jews supported the murder of Pionius, who was a follower of Jesus. During the 3rd century, Joseph of Tiberias was a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court. When he was seen reading the New Testament, he was dragged away by the Rabbinic Jewish authorities and severely tortured, and then thrown in a river with the intent of drowning him. Against all odds, he survived. The only reason he was attacked was because he was reading the New Testament. During the 4th century, Lucius was murdered by his father for accepting Jesus as Messiah. His father was a rabbinic rabbi. The only reason Lucius was murdered was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 4th century, the Rabbinic Jews supported the murder of the Bishop Philip of Heraclea. During the 4th century, the Rabbinic Jews told lies about followers of Jesus, which caused the Persian king to massacre followers of Jesus. The only reason they were massacred was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 6th century, the rabbinic Jewish king Danaz massacred followers of Jesus and burned down churches with the people inside. He then boasted about his exploits to the other local kings and encouraged them to do the same. The only reason followers of Jesus were massacred was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 6th century, the rabbinic Jews attacked followers of Jesus in Caesarea and destroyed churches. The only reason followers of Jesus were attacked was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 7th century, after Rabbi Isaac accepted Jesus as Messiah, the rabbinic rabbi, Levi Samuel, told a vicious lie about Rabbi Isaac, which caused Rabbi Isaac to become physically attacked by the secular authorities. The only reason Rabbi Isaac was attacked was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 7th century, an army consisting of rabbinic Jews and Persians besieged Jerusalem. They later massacred the followers of Jesus in Jerusalem. After the followers of Jesus became prisoners, the rabbinic Jews offered to free them on the condition that they deny Jesus. When they refused to deny Jesus, the rabbinic Jews massacred the followers of Jesus. The only reason followers of Jesus were massacred was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 7th century, rabbinic Jews murdered many followers of Jesus in Antioch. They murdered Patriarch Anastasius and dragged his body through the streets. The only reason followers of Jesus were attacked was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 8th century, while the followers of Jesus were still in church, the rabbinic Jews opened the gates of Toledo to the invading Muslim army, which caused the Muslim army to enter Toledo and massacre the followers of Jesus. The rabbinic Jews supported the massacre of followers of Jesus. During the 9th century, the rabbinic Jew Eleazar told the local king to either make the people deny Jesus or massacre them. The only reason he wanted to massacre them was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 11th century, the monk Eustratius of Petra and his friends were captured by bandits. They were then sold off as slaves to a rabbinic Jew. The rabbinic Jew tried to make them deny Jesus. When they refused to deny Jesus, the rabbinic Jew starved them to death. Eustratius survived the starvation, but was tortured to death instead. The only reason they were murdered was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 16th century, Joshua de Canto was murdered by rabbinic Jews for exposing the blasphemies contained in rabbinic Jewish literature. During the 18th century, there was a Jewish follower of Jesus known as Rabbi Shemuel, who lived in Amsterdam. He was physically attacked by rabbinic Jews to such an extent that he disappeared without a trace. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. The only reason Rabbi Shemuel was attacked was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 19th century, after Rabbi Isaac Lichtenstein accepted Jesus as Messiah, he was physically attacked by the rabbinic Jews. The only reason he was attacked was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 19th century, after Rabbi Daniel Landsman accepted Jesus as Messiah, he was physically attacked by rabbinic Jews, where spikes were pierced through his hands. The only reason he was attacked was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 19th century, after Rabbi Haham Ephraim ben Joseph Eliakim accepted Jesus as Messiah, he was physically attacked by rabbinic Jews. The only reason he was attacked was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 20th century, after Kurt Schneider accepted Jesus as Messiah, his rabbinic Jewish parents sent him to an asylum as punishment. An asylum is a psychiatric institution. The only reason Kurt was attacked was because he accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 20th century, after the Jewish woman Rivka Lazarowicz accepted Jesus as Messiah, her rabbinic Jewish father physically attacked her. The only reason she was attacked was because she accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 20th century, 2 followers of Jesus were physically attacked by rabbinic Jews. The first follower of Jesus, called Moshe, got his arm severely injured. The second follower of Jesus, called Sasha, got his skull cracked open and he also lost his eye. The only reason they were attacked was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 21st century, a rabbinic rabbi told his followers to attack the property of the Jewish follower of Jesus, Hallel Goldman, and to also attack her. The rabbinic Jews threw stones at her and physically harassed her and threatened to murder her. The only reason she was attacked was because she accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 21st century, rabbinic Jews physically attacked Howard Bass and his congregation. The only reason they were attacked was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. During the 21st century, a rabbinic Jew planted a bomb in a package outside the home of David Ortiz. When Ortiz's son opened up the package, the bomb detonated. The son was severely injured from the bomb and nearly died. The son had to go through several surgeries. The only reason the Ortiz family was attacked was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. This is only a selection. There are many more examples. There is evidence that rabbinic Jewish historians have attempted to suppress information about the persecution. The historian Elliot Horowitz states the following, quote, "The tendency of rabbinic Jewish historiography to ignore the slaughter of Jerusalem's Christians in 614, and or the rabbinic Jewish role therein only strengthened after the city came under exclusive. Rabbinic Jewish rule as a consequence of the Six-Day War." End of quote. This also applies to rabbinic Jewish historians who lived during the 20th century, according to Elliot. Throughout the centuries, rabbinic Jews have also spread lies about Jesus and his followers. During the 1st century, rabbinic Jews were calling for the death of the Jewish followers of Jesus in the prayer called Birkat Haminem, which states the following, quote, "May the Jewish Christians and the heretics be destroyed in this moment. May they be blotted out from the book of life." End of quote. The only reason rabbinic Jews called for their death was because Jewish followers of Jesus accepted Jesus as Messiah. Between the 1st century and 3rd century, rabbinic Jews spread lies about followers of Jesus in order to injure followers of Jesus. Ed Kaiser states the following, quote, "Origen charges rabbinic Jews with falsely reporting Christians guilty of cannibalistic practice and sexual orgies." End of quote. The only reason the rabbinic Jews spread the lies about followers of Jesus was because they accepted Jesus as Messiah. The rabbinic Jews have also spread lies about Jesus in writing. One example is in the rabbinic Jewish document called Toldat Yeshu, which states the following, quote, "Yeshu was the illegitimate son of Joseph Pandera. Miriam admitted it." End of quote. Yeshu is a derogatory way to refer to Yeshua, which is the Aramaic name of Jesus. Miriam is the Aramaic name of Virgin Mary. This passage states that Virgin Mary engaged in promiscuity with a man called Pandera, and that Jesus was the result of this union. This quote contains a lie from the devil. The truth is that Jesus was born of a virgin, and the father of Jesus was God the Father. The rabbinic Jewish scholar Chaim Maccabee states the following, quote, "Toldat Yeshu built many of its incidents on these very Talmudic passages." End of quote. The rabbinic authorities, such as Moses Maimonides and Maimonides, have said that there are verses in the Talmud referring to Jesus of Nazareth, in the Talmud's final written form. The rabbinic Jewish scholar Chaim Maccabee states the following, quote, "It appears from the commentaries of Rashi and the Tosafos on the Talmud that all the passages mentioning Jesus by name were regarded as referring to the Christian Jesus." End of quote. Another example is in the verses Gittin 57a from the rabbinic Jewish anthology called the Talmud, which states the following, quote, "Jesus the Nazarene is punished with boiling excrement." End of quote. The rabbinic Jewish scholar Chaim Maccabee states the following, quote, "The passage in which Jesus' punishment in hell is described also seems to refer to the Christian Jesus. It is a piece of anti-Christian polemic dating from the post-70 Common Era period." End of quote. The rabbinic rabbi Eitan Baghdadi said the following, quote, "The Talmud says that the founder of Christianity has been sentenced to boil in feces." End of quote. This quote from the Talmud contains a lie from the devil. The truth is that Jesus is alive in heaven at the right hand of God the Father. The scholar Peter Schaeffer said the following, quote, "Taken together, the texts in the Babylonian Talmud become a daring and powerful counter-gospel to the New Testament in general." End of quote. The rabbinic Jewish director Stephen Bain states the following, quote, "It is also important that rabbinic Jews confront their own tradition and ask how rabbinic Jewish sources treated the Jesus narrative." End of quote. Stephen also said the following, quote, "Lastly, the passage Sanhedrin 43 suggests rabbinic willingness to take responsibility for the execution of Jesus." End of quote. Steve is saying that the rabbinic Jewish leaders in the first century wanted Jesus dead. The rabbinic Jewish leaders wanted to murder an innocent man during the first century. The same rabbinic Jewish leaders later created rabbinic Judaism in order to lead the Jewish people into heresy. The devil is laughing his head off that he has tricked so many ethnic Jews into heresy.
Yeah! Yeah!
The rabbinic Jewish leaders were worshiping the devil. Throughout the centuries, followers of Jesus have forgiven their enemies. After witnessing persecution from rabbinic Jews, the Jewish follower of Jesus, Michael Brown, said the following, quote, "Pray for those who persecute you. You love and forgive." End of quote. After being harassed by rabbinic Jews, the Jewish follower of Jesus, Hal Goldman, said following, quote, "I do not hate them. We prayed for those people who attacked us." End of quote. Ambrosi Astor states the following, quote, "However seriously the rabbinic Jews may have sinned by rejecting the gift of God, they are the children of good people." End of quote. St. Cosmas Idolos states the following, quote, "If a man insults me, it is my duty to forgive him." End of quote. St. Tikhon of Zadon states the following, quote, "Forgiveness is better than revenge." End of quote. In Luke chapter 23, verse 24, Jesus Christ states the following, referring to his enemies, quote, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." End of quote. The Catholic Church states the following, quote, "It has always remained the teaching of the Catholic Church that no one is to be coerced into believing." End of quote. The rabbinic Jews were protected by the Catholic Church because rabbinic Jews are made in the image of God according to the Catholic Church. The Jewish scholar Pinchas Lapide states the following, quote, "Medieval rabbinic Jews as a rule were protected by the popes." End of quote. The Catholic priest Edward Krauss states the following, quote, "There are well over 100 papal bulls and letters of protection of rabbinic Jews." End of quote.
Top 15 Messianic Prophecies. One Messianic prophecy is Psalm 16, verses 8 through 11, where the Messiah will rise from the dead, which is fulfilled in Acts 13, verses 35 through 37. Another Messianic prophecy is in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 through 16, where the Messiah would be a descendant of David, which Jesus fulfilled in Hebrews 1, verse 5. King David's future resurrection was only possible because of the resurrection of his descendant, the Messiah. Jesus is a descendant of King David. Another Messianic prophecy is in Jeremiah 31, verse 31, where the Messiah would bring in a new covenant, which Jesus fulfilled in Matthew chapter 26, verse 28. Another Messianic prophecy is in Zechariah 9, verse 9, where the Messiah would come riding on a donkey, which Jesus fulfilled in Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. Another Messianic prophecy is in Hosea 11, verse 1, where the Messiah would be called out of Egypt, which Jesus fulfilled in Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. Another Messianic prophecy is in Zechariah 11, verses 12 through 13, where the Messiah would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, which was fulfilled in Matthew 26, verses 14 and 15. Another Messianic prophecy is in Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, where the Messiah would be called the Son of Man, which was fulfilled in Matthew chapter 9, verse 6. Another Messianic prophecy is in Psalms chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, where the Messiah would be called the Son of God, which was fulfilled in Mark chapter 1, verse 11. Another Messianic prophecy is in Exodus 12, 1 through 51, where the Messiah would be a willing sacrifice the Passover lamb, which was fulfilled in John 1:29. Another messianic prophecy is in Micah 5, chapter 2, where the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, which was fulfilled in Matthew 2, verses 1 through 6. Another messianic prophecy is in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, where the Messiah would be born of a virgin, which was fulfilled in Luke chapter 1, verses 31 through 35. Another messianic prophecy is in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27, where the Messiah would come at a particular time, which was fulfilled in Matthew 24, verses 15 through 16. Another messianic prophecy is in Isaiah chapter 52, verses 13 through chapter 53, verse 12, where the Messiah would be a suffering servant who would be pierced for our transgressions, which was fulfilled in Matthew chapter 8, verses 16 and 17. Another messianic prophecy is in Isaiah 11, verse 1, where the Messiah would be a Nazarene, which was fulfilled in Matthew chapter 2, verse 23. Another messianic prophecy is in Isaiah chapter 42, verses 1 through 7, where the Messiah would be a light for the nations of the world, which was fulfilled in Matthew 12, verses 15 through 21. Jesus is the only Messiah figure in history who is accepted by virtually all ethnicities on earth. Yeshua HaMashiach, Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus the Messiah, Jesus Christ. For more information, go to the website for Association of Hebrew Catholics and the website Jews for Jesus.
All right, last up, Nadir Ahmed, the famous Muslim apologist, was a guest on my show talking about the divinity of Christ. And I promised him that I would do a quick review episode and reconsider his arguments or facts that he presented and give my take on that as a gesture of respect for, his sincerely caring about whether or not I changed my mind based on the points he raised in the show. So here's that gesture of respect back to you, Nadir, and here's why I haven't changed my mind. So let's bring up the video and I'll play certain clips and we'll go over that now. All right, so kicking off with Nadir Ahmed, there's one issue in particular, namely that I think Nadir saw as being a defeater for any and all of my defeaters against his case for fact. And it's this fact that Jesus says you are all gods. So I just want to play that clip because he thinks the fact that he can prove as a quote unquote fact, Jesus says you are all gods, that this ultimately means defeats all the examples I give proving Jesus claimed I am God, where he explicitly says, I am Yahweh in the flesh. I have a divine nature that only Yahweh can have, and stuff like that. And Nadir says, oh, no, we just dismiss those. Those are irrelevant because Jesus says you are all God. So let's play that clip, and I'm going to give my response to it.
Versus if you apply the principle of charity would make Jesus God. But what happens is we were not able to reconcile the fact that when Jesus says you are all gods, now that causes a problem. So that's where you need interpretation to get past that last hurdle. And that's where the divinity of Christ has a huge problem.
Okay, so this is essentially the clip that we've been going back and forth on, even after the show, privately, on the comments and on our emails and stuff like that. And so he admits, look, on this side, there are tons of facts, way more facts than he's got here. Proof, absolute proof, that Jesus claimed divinity for himself, that he was uniquely a member of the Godhead, of Yahweh, and was Yahweh, right? We have tons of statements, the I am statements. Before Abraham was I am. That's the unique name only for Yahweh. Only God, the Lord our God with the divine nature, could dare to claim that without violating the Shema, which is the single most important statement in Deuteronomy for monotheism. So it's absolute proof. Jesus claims over and over and over and over and over again as an absolute fact that he is God, that he is Yahweh, in the proper language that the first century Jews would know meant, yep, he's claiming to be divine, and that's blasphemy. Let's pick up stones. Let's kill this guy. Let's go after him. And that's what they do when Jesus gives the I am statements. Now, with Nadir, the point is, though, so number one, there's a sly little trick that I don't appreciate where he says, but this is interpretation, not facts. No, interpretations can be facts. When an interpretation is correct, it's a fact, right? An interpretation is just a way of stating a proposition. And what we have to do is ask, is that proposition correct or not? Is it true or false? That's all that matters. So in that sense, sure, yeah, the statement that, Jesus claimed to be I am, claimed to be Yahweh, that's a interpretation of the I am verse, right? Where we understand in context, it means only Yahweh. That is Yahweh's unique name given to Moses that differentiated him from every other false god and fake idol and phony little divinity that the pagans believed in. There's no one like God. There's no one like Yahweh. And he claims, well, we have this defeater because Jesus says you are all gods. And he pretends this is a fact, not an interpretation. No, it's an interpretation. You have to interpret. First of all, Nadir is bringing an interpretation where he says, this isn't an error. Christ actually said this. Well, what if you encounter a liberal Christian? Prove to the liberal Christian Jesus actually said those words. That's an interpretation that Nadir Ahmed is bringing to the table, where he's assuming without any evidence that Jesus actually said this. Now, because I'm a conservative Christian, yeah, I believe Jesus did actually say this. So, but that's still an interpretation. That's him going over the evidence and inferring what he thinks is true as a conclusion. So it's an interpretation. Secondly, he's interpreting what these words mean. You are all gods. What does that mean? You are all gods. What does the word God mean? Does that mean Yahweh? You're the unique one and only members of God? And that's the interpretation I was going with to refute Nadir Ahmed, and I think wrongly so in the show. Now that I'm reflecting upon it, I was going, well, look, obviously Jesus didn't mean this, because this would mean he was advocating for polytheism. He would be saying you are all gods. There's multiple gods with divine natures floating around. And clearly that's not true, as both Nadir and I believe as a Muslim and a Christian. And I went to Psalm 82 to talk about the divine council and how that's not ascribing that there are multiple gods. That's consistent with monotheism. And it's talking about angels and that sort of thing on the divine council back in Psalm 82, which is what Jesus is quoting in context. Now, here's where I was wrong in the show, because this line of attack, Nadir Ahmed is actually agreeing with me, right? Because he adds this, and we have to remember this. He's saying, no, clearly Jesus is not, that's not what Jesus is saying as an interpretation of you are all gods, because Nadir is not a god, and presumably Nadir would agree the Pharisees and scribes and the Jews that Jesus was talking to and said this to, obviously Jesus didn't believe they were gods. So Nadir is actually confirming that. So on that front, I have a defeater for him, taking that into account now. So that's what I want to add that's new based on the show. So we agree, Jesus, you can't interpret you are all gods as being literal and explicit as a fact that Jesus was saying you are all gods. Clearly Jesus believes, and Nadir is saying that it's a fact that Jesus said you are all gods in a non-divine sense. Great. That's exactly what Christians who believe in the Trinity say. Yeah, when Jesus says you are all gods, claiming I am God or you are God is totally irrelevant to whether or not someone's divine or not. Because that's not how an ancient Jew in the first century would claim to be Yahweh or claim to be divine. No one, it's very anachronistic to go, well, unless I see the words I am God, that would be irrelevant, right? Because look, the Psalm 82 calls the Jews, you are gods. So even if Jesus said, I am God, who cares? maybe that's relevant to us in a 21st century modern English sense because we misunderstand how to claim to be God today. But back in the first century Jewish context, if Jesus did say, I am God, the Jews would be like, so what? Who cares? We're all gods. Psalm 82 says we are gods, right? So it's no big deal. That's, if you say I am God, that is not a claim to divinity. That's the wrong anachronistic sense that Muslims always make this misunderstanding because they're not up to date on biblical scholarship. And that's what the problem with Nadir here is he's refuting his own facts in his list because Jesus says you are all gods, and if he doesn't mean that literally entailing polytheism, well, then that contradicts this as a defeater for Tawhid. Jesus never explicitly claimed, I am God. Who cares? Because if he did claim to be I am God, that's equivalent to saying you are all gods, and that doesn't imply divinity, according to Nadir Ahmed's own admission in his quote-unquote fact, where he says, this causes a problem because Nadir is not God, and neither were any human being, the Pharisees or scribes or Jews Jesus is talking to. They're not even God, not even close, because they can't make Porsches and stuff like that. That proves that you're interpreting what God means. The words I am God means, or you are all gods means. And whatever the interpretation is here, it's clear that it doesn't entail that someone is Yahweh, that someone has the divine nature. Whereas on the other side, we do have explicit claims where Jesus says, I am Yahweh. He says that in words that the first century ancient Jews and all biblical scholars with a PhD understand is, yep, he's saying he's Yahweh. He's saying he's a member of the Shema, the monotheistic one true God that's unique and all other gods are false. When he says the I am statements, I and the Father are one, I am the invisible, there's so many of these statements that Nadir Ahmed is familiar with, including the ones I mentioned about the divine identity, the scholarship of Dr. Richard Bauckham, which Nadir Ahmed has to go, yep, looks like Jesus did claim it. But his only out is to say, but Jesus said you are all gods, so that's totally irrelevant. No, because we've proven saying you are all gods and or I am God is irrelevant. That is not how you claim to be divine or claim to be Yahweh in the first century Jerusalem. And Nadir is admitting that with his facts here. But on the other hand, we have clear statements where Jesus says, yep, I'm Yahweh. I'm divine. I am the one true God. And that's where we get the proof on the Christian side. I am the creator. I took part in creation. Only Yahweh takes part in creation. Beautiful. So it's just clear and obvious that Nadir is wrong, and his own list of facts contradict each other because he should remove this. Jesus never explicitly claimed, I am God. Well, who cares? Because according to you, Jesus says that you are all gods. Therefore, using the words, if Jesus did say, I am God, it would have been totally irrelevant. The biblical scholars would have laughed. The Jews at the time would have laughed and said, yep, you are God. That's true. We have no problem with you saying that because we're all gods. And that doesn't mean we're divine. You claim to be Yahweh. Now I'm picking up stones to stone you. Just like with Jesus in the Gospel of John, when he says, before Abraham was, I am. Instantly, the Jews understood it. They picked up the stones. They wanted to kill that guy for blasphemy. So it's clear. The Christians are the only ones with actual facts in this respect. The Muslims' facts are contradictory. They contradict each other in terms of using the fact that Jesus never used the English words, I am God, and or the Greek equivalent of I am God. But yet, on the other hand, it's supposedly a fact Jesus says, you are all gods. Well, those two facts contradict each other, or they prove what exactly the Trinitarian Christian was saying all the time. Making that kind of statement is just irrelevant with respect to whether or not Jesus was actually divine or not, or with respect to whether Jesus was saying the Pharisees or the Jews were actually divine or not. Totally irrelevant. Those words mean nothing. It's kind of like using the phrase Son of God. That's not really a title for divinity. That applies to human beings. in the first century. Jesus, here's a fact, Nadir. Jesus said, I am the Son of Man. Ooh, dang. That is a unique claim to being divine. Only Yahweh can be associated with the Son of Man, divine, coming on the clouds of heaven in judgment. That is absolute proof. Jesus claimed to be divine and claimed to be Yahweh. And that's what's relevant here, right? Again, the debate was check your own words. It's not about whether Jesus was God, because of course then he wouldn't be God. God in the fullest sense is a Trinity, according to Christianity, right? So Jesus was just one person as part of God. But the question was, does Jesus claim to be divine or not? Is he a divine person within God or within the Godhead? And there we've got absolute proof. Jesus claims that. All the proof is on that side. There isn't a single shred of facts that provably speak against that. All you have are certain facts which you interpret, or I should rather say misinterpret, in a way to be consistent with your Islamic bias. So that's why you have totally failed to persuade me in any way. Your misinterpretations of Jesus not saying I am God, and or saying, about this claim to divinity of Christ, and also Jesus saying to the Pharisees, you are all gods, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't work. Even if I'm taking into account, I think the way you're actually interpreting these words now, not to mean that Jesus says you are all polytheists and meaning that literally, but no, you're actually agreeing with me that whatever Jesus was saying, when Jesus said the words, you are all gods, he didn't mean to say that you are all divine. And if that's the case, then who cares whether Jesus says, I am God or not? I just care about, does Jesus say, I am divine? And there, my gosh, he says it in so many ways that the ancient first century Jews all understood to be, yep, he's claiming to be Yahweh in the flesh. Let's get the stones. Let's kill this guy. That's blasphemy. And everyone understood it. The Gospels are clear. So yeah, that's my take on Nadir. That's really the main thing that we were kind of going back and forth about. I'm not going to spend much more time on the other stuff because I think we did kind of give the proper response to all the other stuff in the show. Yeah, I thank Nadir sincerely for actually caring and following up as on a personal level to see, like, after the show, did anything change or not. I respect the heck out of the fact that you care about persuading people of the truth of your claims as you see it, and I feel the same way. So yeah, Nadir, I've got you on my list. I'm going to be reaching out to you to bring you back on the show sometime to maybe have a more formal discussion on, if not a debate, just a little bit more formalized on different claims, such as your specialty, but the scientific foreknowledge evidence in the Quran. So hopefully you'll say yes to that, but you're welcome on my show anytime for any topics you want to discuss. So yeah, thank you very much, and take care, everybody. That's it for my grand finale show of the weekly version of the Real Seekers podcast. From now on, I'm going to be kind of taking a break, focusing on other things, but I've still got a whole bunch of other stuff in the works. I'm still going to be doing all my Shroud Wars, all my guest shows that I have scheduled, that I've already got promises to do. I'm going to, keep doing those on an ad hoc basis, or shows on an ad hoc basis on various topics and stuff like that. But the only thing that's changing is that I'm no longer guaranteeing one or more shows a week. That's the only thing that's really changing. But Real Seekers is still going on as a podcast. And like I said, I mentioned to you my about my Shroud Explorations Bible study, as well as being willing to teach churches other Bible studies. So, please reach out to your churches and see if they might be interested in hiring me to teach a 4-week course on the Shroud or some other topic or something like that in Christian apologetics or the philosophy of religion. That would really help me out in terms of gaining some extra cash and stuff like that. So yeah, I would love I love being a teacher. It would be amazing to combine that with the need for money to buy food and stuff like that and pay bills. So yeah, that's it for that. Thank you guys for listening. And I will see you guys sometime in November. I've got Tyler Vela coming on to discuss the problem of evil with David Russell and possibly Travis Lee. So that will be the next show that I've got lined up for you guys sometime probably in mid-November on a Thursday night. So, all right, take care.